The Premier League, one of the greatest sporting spectacles in the world.
Berbatov! Wonderful! Arteta! It looks like it's going to be Everton's day in the derby. Oh, he's going it alone at the moment. And why not? He is up and running in a Liverpool shirt. Tiote! Incredible! Astonishing! Newcastle United have pulled off one of the greatest Premier League comebacks of all time. Rooney! Oh, wonderful! What a goal! England's top club.
It's 20 years since the Premier League was born. 20 years in which England's game has exploded onto the international scene.
There's that fantastic tribalism which creates this unbelievable product that everyone tries to win. It's fantastic.
Whichever way you look at it, it's been quite remarkable. We always knew that, as an analogy, it was an aeroplane just ready to take off. It was on the runway, but we didn't quite know how high it was going to fly.
But fly it did.
Wow! No one is stopping that!
From the womb of the Football League emerged an entertainment machine which has become the envy of the footballing world.
Premier League is the best championship in Europe. The best players, every match the ground are full.
The Premier League is comfortably the most watchable all-round product.
Oh, he's going on a slalom run! That's unbelievable!
The quality is there in genuine depth, and I think there's some outstanding football grounds. They're usually packed week in, week out. There's just a real bigness around the Premier League now that makes everybody want to be part of it.
The Premier League has become a treasure trove of world-class talent, drawn from Britain and around the world.
Dennis Bergkamp is in, and that is brilliant.
Now the best English players stay in England and the best foreign players join England. It has shown how important a vision is.
It's a wonderful run by Nani! It's a brilliant goal!
We've been able to bring the very best talent from around the world. And that's altered the mindset of English players and English supporters and English coaches.
Every foreign player that comes to England will tell you they love playing at English stadia because of the atmosphere, the determination, the fans, the camaraderie.
The Premier League is the most exciting league in the world by far.
It's also Britain's most successful sporting export, watched live each week in more than 200 countries.
The English Premier League is now €1 billion ahead of any other league in the world. And you compare that with 20 years ago when we were lagging behind, that's an amazing transformation.
Barton goes for it! What a fantastic goal!
What it is today is something exceptional, and actually a model for the rest of Europe. They would love in the rest of Europe to have a league like this.
It's show-stopping stuff from Arsenal!
The interest is just so great, it's just incredible. The razzmatazz, the excitement, it is the best league in the world.
A success story then, beyond all expectations. Yet it emerged 20 years ago from a long, dark moment in the history of English football. The beginnings of the English love affair with football are lost in the mists of time. Football sprang from the working-class people of England, first from rural communities, later from cities that huddled around the factories of the Industrial Revolution. By the 20th century, hundreds of thousands of supporters, mostly men, were scaling the heights of enormous football grounds to urge on their favourite teams. They stood shoulder to shoulder on the steep terraces, rain and shine, secure in their tribal loyalties.
The scene, if anything, has got a little grimmer since you were last with us.
But in April 1989, there occurred at Hillsborough, the home ground of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club, one of the worst disasters in sporting history.
Emergency services all over the area.
96 people died. Many hundreds were injured.
And many fans have been carried away.
Can you remember what your reaction was? Can you equate it with anything else that happened to you in your life?
I don't think I can, actually. I mean, even now you'll see it affects me emotionally. It was devastating.
It was out of this moment that the determination to launch what was to become the richest, most international football league in the world was born 20 years ago. On Friday, 16th November 1990, in a tower block on the south bank of the River Thames, a dinner was being prepared. Security was tight. The guest list was secret and exclusive. It bore the names of the aristocracy of the world of English football: Arsenal and Manchester United, Tottenham and Everton, and Liverpool. The Big Five, all members of Division 1 of the Football League. But the powerful men who actually ran the Football League knew nothing of this clandestine dinner party. Tonight, on the anniversary of that dinner, the Big Five meet again. David Dean of Arsenal, Noel White of Liverpool, Sir Philip Carter of Everton, Martin Edwards of Manchester United, and last to arrive, Irving Scholar of Tottenham Hotspur.
Good, you. If you're a television guy like me...
Their host was Greg Dyke, later to become Director-General of the BBC, but then a senior executive of ITV.
All the money went to footballers. Yes.
In 1988, he'd negotiated a 4-year TV contract with the Football League.
We made it clear that we were happy with the way things were going. And we then brought the subject back to, if we were ever going to change things to create a new league, would you buy the television rights?
Had you anticipated something like this?
Yes. The question was, did they have the nerve to do it?
The senior clubs felt that they weren't completely in control of their own destiny. They weren't getting true value for their product.
It wasn't initially the concept of a breakaway, it was the concept of obtaining the rights and the power for the First Division to function as we thought it was necessary to function.
The really interesting thing at that dinner was the one thing they all said is, we cannot do this without the FA.
The Football Association is recognised internationally as the leading authority in English football.
Every league has to be registered on an annual basis with the FA. We needed the sanction of the FA. We couldn't have done it unilaterally.
Now, it just so happened that there that night was a man called Noel White, who was chairman of Liverpool that year, for 1 year only, who had impeccable connections inside the FA. These are the days when Liverpool was still the preeminent club in British football. In an hour or two, they got round to deciding that now was the moment. Now was the time to break away from the Football League and set up a Premier League.
By the time the dishes had been cleared away in November 1990, the foundations of the FA Premier League had been laid. But the arguments were only just beginning. And to understand them, you have to go back at least 10 years. For years, football in England had been plagued by arguments between the Football League and the Football Association.
The FA and the Football League always hated each other. I once met Alan Hardacre's daughter at a dinner, and I said, why did your dad move the Football League to Lytham St Anne's? And she said, because it was the furthest he could go to get away from the FA.
The big clubs felt they had little control over the way the league was run. On the one club, one vote system, the smaller clubs simply had too much voting power.
So they could always stop us. Yes. Whatever we wanted to do.
It was a tail wagging the dog. I remember suggesting that we put players' names as well as their numbers on their shirts, just like in American football. The clubs rejected it, and it took years to railroad through something that's now accepted around the world.
We could not introduce rules specifically for the First Division. The only way we could do that was by introducing and creating a whole new league.
Martin was here.
Right.
And that dinner in 1990 wasn't the first time that the Big Five had considered breaking away to form a Super League. The Big Five had been meeting informally for 9 years. They were drawn together by a shared dissatisfaction with the rest of the league.
A supplementary question, what was the menu?
The other divisions were living off the revenue that the first division was generating.
We wanted autonomy. That was the truth. We actually wanted to be able to paddle our own canoe, didn't we? It wasn't we wanted all the money, I can tell you, absolutely, categorically.
Was there, in these meetings that you had, the beginnings of the formation of a sort of a club?
Yes, I think that's true.
There used to be private meetings of 5 clubs called the Big Five, when we were looking at how were we going to drive the game forward. Those 5 clubs realised that if they weren't going to do it, it wouldn't happen.
The only way we were going to be able to take the game forward was by breaking away.
I think also there was some feeling that we should remain part of the whole as long as we got a bigger share of the cake.
The Big Five looked to American football to see how the league there marketed their game.
Certainly seeing an American football match was an entertainment. The colour, the spectacle, the way it was promoted, the way it was televised, they made the most of the event.
Which was a huge contrast to the conditions for the average caged-in fan of the average English Football League club.
Those days, there was very little in English football, apart from the game itself. In fact, there was only 10 minutes for half-time when I joined the board. In fact, we had to go to a lot of lengths to get a 15-minute half-time to allow the public to have a pea and a burger. You do one or the other, but you couldn't do both. Historically, fans were used to standing cheek to jowl and being uncomfortable and waiting in line and 50 deep to go to the loo. That's what it was like. But things had to change.
In 1985, morale in English football was hit by a series of tragedies. On May the 11th, 56 people died in a fire in the west stand of the Bradford City Ground, as this shocking footage records. Then, a wall collapsed at Birmingham City, and a young fan died. 3 weeks later, in full view of millions of television viewers watching Liverpool play Juventus in the European Cup final at the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, 39 people, mostly Italian, were killed and 454 injured in an outbreak of hooliganism. English clubs were banned from European competitions for 5 years.
It was a dark period for English football.
Hooliganism was rife. A lot of people had been killed quite unnecessarily at a football game, which was incomprehensible.
For the major clubs who'd been appearing in Europe for year after year, and the revenue that generated, to suddenly lose that, it really was a big shock.
You were getting problems before and after games in towns and cities and even the smaller clubs.
Hardly any women went. Kids were nervous about going to the grounds.
Suddenly, football was transferred from the back page headlines to front page headlines.
As football searched its soul, the relationship between English football and the television companies sank to its lowest ebb. In 1985, for the first time, English football was dropped from the television schedule. The league clubs accused the BBC and ITV, who were rivals to screen their matches, of working together as a cartel to reduce the price they'd pay for English football. The truth was that in the mid-1980s, no one knew exactly how much English football was worth to television. The BBC and ITV were offering the league £3.9 million. But now, a firm of independent consultants valued it at £12 million. However much television would pay, the league clubs were bitterly divided on how that money should be shared up between them.
There was 92 clubs, and the television money was divided by 92.
Mansfield got as much as Manchester United, and Lincoln got the same as Liverpool, which in a sense was a bit daft because Lincoln and Mansfield weren't the clubs that the television companies wanted to show, but Liverpool and Manchester United clearly were.
In September 1985, the Big Five talked again of breaking away from the Football League.